All right, cool. So we're going to have 2 panels today. First and foremost, thank you all for coming on this beautiful Friday here in San Francisco. This turnout is absolutely amazing. We thought people were going to go out to dinner, be hanging out in the Mission, maybe in the marina. You guys are all here to listen to AI. So I have a few questions. How many of you, quick raise of hands, are AI experts or work in the field of AI? Can I see really quick? Okay, cool. How many of you work in a business that's trying to incorporate AI? Awesome. And how many of you are just like AI curious, interested? Okay, awesome. Cool, so I just want to tell you a real quick story of how this event came to be. It's a weird kind of chain of events that happened. Jay, by the way, over there is going to be talking in a second. Please give a round of applause because he's graciously given this space for all of us to hang out in. So Jay and I were hanging out over coffee, and sad thing, I and my fiance Anya will be leaving the Bay. So we were like, hey, we should have a going away party in this beautiful space that I have. I have a DJ buddy, and he can, spin some tracks. DJ Man Cub, spinning the 1s and 2s. And so out of that, we met with one of the first checks that I had in my company, Sutro, Rohit. And he was like, hey, we might be able to turn this event into something much larger. And I'm like, cool, because I actually have a podcast that I want to do a launch for. And he's like, amazing, let's go ahead and have a podcast launch party. And so I'm going to go ahead and drop the podcast right now. The podcast that I'm starting is called Liquid Assets, the Business of Water. It is having an honest conversation around policy, governance, anything to do with AI, technology, and management around water, because water is going to be a really important thing for us today. And then Rohit says, hey, why don't we go ahead and make this thing even broader? Let's call it AI Unleashed. How we're using AI today, and let's go ahead and have a diverse panel so we can have honest conversations across the spectrum, because honestly, who the hell knows what they're doing with AI outside of asking ChatGPT something, right? And so we constructed this amazing panel. We have amazing folks from healthcare. We have folks that are investing in AI. We have people in content. We have people that are looking at food, using AI for food. And so you'll get to hear them all today in 2 separate panels that we're going to have. One is going to be moderated by Tammy from Pebblebit, which is a new and emerging venture capitalist. And the second is moderated by myself. And a few shout outs that I want to give before I hand over the mic to Jay to talk about the space is, how many of you guys are here from Forbes under 30? Can I get a round of, there's only like a few of us. Well, round of applause for the Forbes folks for sponsoring the event. Also for Rohit at Future Communities Capital for providing the capital for the food. The entire spread was vegan, if you guys didn't know it. Also to Truffle Shuffle for sponsoring the food as well. Focus Scientific, and obviously my podcast, Liquid Assets. So if you guys don't know, go to Spotify, look up Liquid Assets, and hit the subscribe button. All right, I'm going to go ahead and hand it off to Jay to talk about the space, and we're going to go ahead and hand off to Tammy after that to start the panel. Can we get the 3 panelists to actually come up and get set up?
That's it. Thank you. All right. Welcome, everyone. So what is this space is what I keep getting asked. It's actually an experiment. I've done this biotech, life sciences, food tech incubation thing for a minute. And that's actually how I met Robbie. He had his dev team working out of one of the labs that I had set up. And the idea here is the same thing, what's possible, what's needed, really help kind of early ideas come together, whether it's lab, biotech, wet labs, dry labs, hardware, whatever it is, it's possible here. The idea is to kind of, bring community together and put together ideas and see what's possible, whether it's like a letting space or put some together where it's an incubator or an accelerator and so on and so forth. There are a handful of things being worked out as we speak. I don't know where Ashil is, but we're putting together a program to support African efforts and startups is a program over here called Focus Academy that's been in play for a minute, and that one supports a lot of, international entities trying to get a soft landing in the U.S., whether they're in healthcare or other life sciences. So yeah, it's a space that we're kind of exploring different things with, and we opened the doors, soft opened about 2 months ago, and it looks like it's a pretty good spot for events too. So we'll see how it holds up. And with that, I don't know. I think yeah. If you have any questions, comments, whatever, find me afterwards. Yeah.
All right, thank you, Jay. I'm going to go ahead and hand it over to Tammy to kick off the first panel.
Hello, everyone. How's your Friday evening going? That's not strong enough. You all need to take more of the drinks in the back. I think we have today a pretty diverse panel, and I'm very excited to hear from all of you. I think all of you were founders or are founders now, so I think very interesting perspectives to have, and Srina is an investor now as well. I think we'll start with a bunch of introductions, so maybe Srina, do you want to start?
All right. Hi, everyone. My name is Srina Karani. Really, really excited to be here with all of you. It's just so honestly great to be with folks in person again. So thank you for turning out on a Friday night. I am the managing partner of a venture capital firm called Snowcap. We're brand new, and we are investing in deep tech climate. So we're focused on investments high up the supply chain, really investing in the molecules, the processes, the stuff that's kind of hard, and a lot of the stuff that normal VCs don't like to invest in. And a big part of that is because of my background. So I am actually a mechanical engineer, also a founder and operator, and I understand how hard it is to build in climate, right? To solve problems that are big, that are scary, and that people understand we need to tackle, but don't necessarily get how to actually invest in. So really excited about this panel on AI and honestly really important topics that we want to make sure we can build the future that we want to live in. So thanks again for joining.
Hi, everybody. My name is Jared Dibner. I lead technology at Keto, where we leverage data and machine learning to transform healthcare with a focus on safety net chronic illness. Thanks to the hosts for inviting me here. I've known Robbie for a long time. Shout out to Liquid Assets. Looking forward to a really great conversation.
Hi, everyone. My name is Bhavik. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Upview.ai. We're an early stage content creator AI company. And what we are doing is we're helping content creators, starting with YouTube, to become like Mr. Beast. Just a quick show of hands. How many of you consume YouTube content? How many of you actually create YouTube content? And that's what we want to change. So imagine if you had an AI tool assistant who actually helped you figure out what you need to do to grow while you do what you do for a living. And that's really what we're trying to change. Just a bit of a background for myself. I was managing a family office before I started working on Upview, mostly focusing on impact investment. And I actually went to Cal over here, so this is home for me. And otherwise, I live with my beautiful wife, Isha, in Southern California. Thank you so much for having me.
And very quickly, I know I'm the most boring one here on the panel, but my name is Tammy. I'm one of the partners at a new firm called Pebblebed, which was co-founded with Keith Adams, who was the founder of Facebook AI Research, who then went on to be chief architect at Slack, and Pamela Bagata, who was one of the founding engineers at OpenAI, went on to run AI for Stripe. We do pre-seed and seed primarily. We invest in founders with a nerdy secret, and we are pretty concentrated fund. So we code with our companies, we code for our companies. So if you're interested in that sort of technical investor, feel free to reach out. But thank you all for coming here today. Very excited to hear from all of you in very different sectors: climate, healthcare, content. What is something about kind of this new era of AI that, well, there's two things. One is, what has surprised you pleasantly about what AI can do in your ecosystem, respectively? And what has disappointed you? Like, what is something you wish AI could have done, but it has not been kind of fulfilled yet?
Sure. Well, I'll begin. And can everybody hear me? I've got the mic in the right place. Okay. So in the healthcare landscape, technology has always been about 20 years behind the Bay Area, so to speak. And that has, frankly, been the disappointment from a technology adoption standpoint. As a technologist in that industry, it's been quite difficult to ensure that technology is adopted in the right place by the right people. And there are a number of reasons for that. It's not illogical, but we can get into that later if we want to. I think that the most intriguing thing to me that's happened over the course of the past year or two in the world that I work in is that the introduction, or I should say, the popularization of LLMs and the fact that they have become a household term has transformed the way that my physicians think about technology. So, rewind 5 years, and the physicians that I might be working with aren't always excited about advances in technology for good reason. They've been traumatized by bad technology in the past. But now, fast forward to now, and we live in a world where physicians are incredibly excited about the potential of artificial intelligence, I think because of the nature of being able to communicate directly. Language has done a tremendous amount of good in terms of progressing people's acceptance of technology in my industry.
Hello? Was it accessibility that allowed doctors to start being excited about technology versus previous technological advancements?
Well, I think that it's really a perception thing. The perspective and the perception of communicating with, an AI or a machine in a human language has had a tremendous impact on our physicians, on their interpretation of what it means to use technology to further the world of healthcare, if that makes sense. And so there's been a sea change moment in my world, certainly.
Very interesting. Shrina Babik?
Shrina.
Sure, yeah. Thanks for giving me a second to think about it. I think in the climate space, there's a couple of things that have been incredibly surprising. I think for one is just the incredibly broad applicability of AI, right? We have everyone from people using satellite imagery to build better climate models to help farmers in developing regions better predict their agricultural yields, right? That is a very real application we've started to see become significantly more easy and a lot more accessible to people on the ground, all the way through to using things like ChatGPT to better market climate change, right? No one wants to hear about the doom and gloom. No one wants to hear about all the things that are depressing and how the world's going to end. So how do we take the perspective of something positive? How do we take the perspective of what is the future we want to live in? And how do we take some of these threats and actually use them in a catalytic way to actually build that future? So I think that's one of the things that's been incredibly exciting for me and a bit of a pleasant surprise is to see the incredible scope of AI and climate from building models through to marketing, right? In terms of what's disappointing is a little bit of me talking about out of the other side of my mouth is that it's not yet widespread, right? We're starting to see companies that are actually leveraging it, but maybe similar to healthcare, I feel like a lot of these spaces are a little bit more reticent to actually leverage new technology because they're often concerned about the ethical implications. They're concerned about what are the downsides? How can this be used to further the gap? How can this be used to increase bias because of how we're building a lot of these models? And that's something that's incredibly challenging, right? Especially when we're tackling really hard hit sectors, things that affect our daily lives. We want to make sure that we're not actually increasing bias. We're not increasing discrepancies and disparities in terms of the types of quality of life that people have access to. And I think, unfortunately, that's become a bit of a barrier. People are taking a step back instead of diving in. So that is one part that I think that has been a little bit disappointing just in terms of experimenting more and figuring out what the real limits of this technology is in terms of being able to apply it to climate change.
If I may ask a little bit more on that, have you seen any player be successful in addressing some of this reticence? Like, do you have any tactics that you think you would like to share with the audience?
Just give me a second.
Sorry.
Sure. So in content creation, AI has been quite prolifically being used. Just think about it from the product side of things, right? YouTube has been, or I'm just talking about YouTube because that's the first platform we're starting with. YouTube has been using AI to suggest content which works beautifully well. And that's why we have about 2.2 billion active users on a monthly level of YouTube. And they are just growing at about 51% or so. It's just ridiculous. And numbers are all over because YouTube is super opaque about it. What has not happened is that AI has not been used to support creators, which is why in this particular room itself, less than 1% are actually content creators, and everyone consumes content. So there's not a lot of work that has happened in helping people figure this thing out. One of the things that I personally feel very, very hopeful about is how can someone cut down all the steps between pressing record or sharing whatever you have and posting content successfully? Because posting content is easy, but traction is tough, right? And Ravi will tell you more about from the success of this event. But in general, that's what we're trying to cut down. One of the things that I'm concerned about, so I was traveling to India about 7 months back in a tribal area, about 200 miles from a major city. I had a show of hands because I met with a bunch of women in their mid-40s, and they were basically daily wage workers making less than $40 a month. I asked all of them, has anyone heard about YouTube? No show of hands. I asked all of them, has anyone seen a red color button on your screen? Because India has over 450 million smartphone users, a lot of them in the villages. 98% people actually are consuming content on YouTube. They just don't know it's called YouTube, just by the way. So that's the hope and concern, because that's the widespread success of such a tool. But at the same time, if these people want to actually contribute and share what they have to share with all of you over here, which is not difficult in this day and age, they do not have the necessary tools. So that's what we're trying to change over here.
Sorry, I'm one of those people that have to take a minute to think about things, which maybe doesn't make me the best panel, so apologies to my co-panelists. There's two examples that I feel like are helping me overcome some of this reticence in terms of being able to actually leverage AI. One in the ad tech space and one in the energy space. So the one in the ad tech space was an example that I referenced earlier around helping farmers in developing regions be able to access to high quality environmental data, right? So there's a founder based out of Kenya. Her name is Kate Callett, that's building a company called Amini. And Amini is trying to be the Bloomberg terminal for environmental data. There's a bunch of satellites out there. There's a bunch of companies that have really great quality data. It's not affordable. So all the people that actually want to use this data, it's not truly accessible. Just because it's there doesn't mean it's accessible. And so she's actually launching nano satellites to be able to focus on sub-Saharan Africa and support farmers that are coming out of the region, and with changing climate, need to better understand agricultural yields, right? They can't get their crops insured if they can't understand what their yields are going to be in the coming years. So I think that's a really great example of someone who is, I think I hate comparing AI and Web3, but I feel like in sort of the crypto hype, we also saw a lot of people saying like, we're gonna fix agriculture, we're gonna fix all these supply chains, like getting on the ground and tracking all these little things and how timber and forests are being cut down. But it didn't really happen because we weren't actually able to reach the people on the ground. Whereas I feel like with the next wave of AI that we're starting to see, we're actually able to help turn all of that data and all the machine learning and all of that that's happening elsewhere and actually turn it into usable insights for people on the ground, which I think is incredibly powerful. The second one that I'll speak very shortly about is grid optimization. I mean, as we talk about renewable energy, changing off of fossil fuels, decarbonizing our economy, there's a lot of great work in bringing more renewables online, we don't know yet how exactly that energy is going to actually get to our grids, right? So we have in certain states even an excess of renewable energy being produced that we're not using to actually power our homes. We're not actually using it to power commercial clients or industrial clients. It's just not really happening. And so the first application of that we've seen has actually, again, been in sub-Saharan Africa, where a lot of, actually in South Africa specifically, where because of a lot of the microgrid crises that are happening, there's a problem that they need to solve, and now they're starting to leverage AI. They're taking all of these incredible assets they have around renewable energy and actually optimizing it for the microgrid so they understand when to turn things on, when to turn things off in a way that it just hasn't worked before. And honestly, it's better than how it works here. So I think we're starting to see a lot of the leapfrogging that we hope for in technology development actually happening now with AI.
Very cool. I actually want to extend that question to both Jared and Bhavik. Like, both of you have done work with like nonprofits. Bhavik, you are MSI and USAID and did that impact investing. Jared, you've done work with Give Change. How has your kind of experience with the impact and nonprofit sector informed the way you're building your company with AI, especially around the risks of AI?
Sorry, I want to say everyone has been such a great audience for this panel, and I understand there are amazing people in this room, but if we could ask the people in the back to quiet down, and if you're next to someone who's talking, give them a dirty look. I promise, we'll be done soon. Thank you.
So in terms of, if I try to draw a direct reference between what I did before, which was impact investment and content creation, in terms of the technicalities, probably there is very less to say, but empathy would be the first thing that I would like to draw on, right? And when I say empathy, let me explain more. The reason why I think AI is missing out on the general masses like attention span, it's because we've not really thought about how to simplify the use of AI tools in a way that people understand. Now think about this, and I'm just talking about one company, and forgive me if some of you work there, but LinkedIn. LinkedIn was started by folks from San Jose, I'm guessing, but today it's been used by people across the world. I don't think LinkedIn founders really took into consideration when they started this company as to how people from different cultures really explain what they do professionally. But today, all cultures have to adhere to the way LinkedIn or all these other platforms really ask them to, provide the information in. The reason why YouTube is, or any video content platform is so successful is because there is no framework. You just can't say what you want to say the way you want to say it, right? So I think, going back to your question, my exposure to people from across social strata, different income groups, allows me to empathize and figure out how do we use content creation and the tools that we're building, which is Upuse, the platform that we're trying to create. How do we cater that to masses so that we do not have less than 0.4% of all content creators making money, which is why you see these crazy numbers and actually open and democratize ad revenue across.
That's an interesting point, Bhavik, in that am I right that you're after the democratization of the ability to be a creator? Yeah, I think that, AI holds tremendous value for the ability to democratize a number of different services. And one of them in my world, and one that plays a really important part in our company, is the mission of kind of democratizing really high quality healthcare. So if you think about the experience from the healthcare standpoint of our elite, right? We have our nutrition coaches, we have our fitness coaches, we have our primary care docs that we're meeting on a monthly basis. We're doing consistent blood panels, probably on a monthly basis. So these things do a lot to kind of smooth out the curve of our healthcare and keep us very healthy, but they're also very expensive and they require a lot of human input. And so part of the value that AI brings, I think, to healthcare is really democratizing the ability to expand something that is really only available to our elite across the world, really. I think that's has a tremendous potential flying bet. Yep.
We have 5 minutes left, so I'll ask 2 more questions. In the AI space now, there is a lot of noise. I've seen decks that have generative AI appear on the front page while I'm still talking to the founder. So question for Shrina as an investor is, how do you separate the signal from the noise? And then for Jared and Bave, how do you be the signal amidst all of this noise? Like how has your experience been like talking to investors, leveraging AI, riding on the wave of AI, but without, using that as smoke and mirrors, like actually talking to what the actual product and impact of what you're building? What is that like?
Yeah, it's a fantastic question. I think a big part of it comes down to the fact that, sorry, as a founder, I apologize for throwing this at both of you, but I feel like founders are always trying to bullshit you. They're always trying to find something that's new and sexy to put in front of you that's like, this is the thing, this is why we're better than everyone else. And sometimes you buy it. I've attempted to sell it myself. But for the most part, you're able to understand what the real value is, right? You understand that founders need to keep up. You understand that founders need to pivot. They need to make sure that they're using the latest technology to improve their product, to make sure that they're not falling behind. But ultimately, what is the real value that they're creating through their business? And I think that is the job of any investor, is to do your diligence, is to dig in and say, what's the problem you're solving? Who are you solving that problem for? Are they going to be the end user of whatever AI you might try to build? Or is it something that's going to improve and optimize your processes on the back end and just make it incredibly straightforward and easy for your user to actually use? So I feel like it's not that different from sort of any other hype cycle that comes in technology, in the sense that in some cases it can be incredibly helpful. In some cases it can improve the value proposition of what the company's trying to sell. And in other cases it is, just kind of bullshit. So I think that's the job of the investor, is to figure out what is it that they're actually trying to build? Who are they building it for? What is the true value that they're creating? And can it actually be improved with AI, or is it just a distraction, right? I think in a lot of cases, especially with the improvement and accessibility and ease of use of a lot of different types of AI, I mean, we're using AI as like a very broad term here, right? Like it kind of applies to so many different things. So it depends on what is your interpretation of it. How are you using it for your business? Are you saying that you're going to be able to increase efficiency with your 10 employees because everyone's going to be trained on how to be the best prompt engineer for ChatGPT? Sure, great. Everyone should probably be doing that. But are you actually building some form of generative AI for your company? That's a different story. So I think a big part of it really comes down to doing your diligence as an investor, understanding the real value that's being created and who you're actually trying to solve that problem for.
Yeah, actually, I had one point to that. So, but yeah, no. So I'm gonna conveniently take my founder hat off and put the family office hat on, and just to respond to Shrina that I think it's users, right? I mean, the whole point of this noise is because all of us and a lot of people actually thought ChatGPT is awesome and forwarded it to their friends and colleagues, and that's basically the crux of the matter. So users. So I think now putting my founder's hat on, I'm just going to mention that we are focusing on early success stories, at least at UpView. So just to kind of give you very quickly about what we did with Ananda Worldwide. Ananda is a spiritual community, and they were struggling at about 88,000 subscribers. And these guys looking for donations, and YouTube is a great way for them to build that audience. We used AI to get them contextual content ideas, to come up with videos that would actually work, get them traction, because they don't know how to market. And we grew their revenue by 6x. They're currently at 165,000 subscribers. You guys can check it out. We have a great graph, which Ravi suggested you should put a t-shirt on just so that you don't have to explain what UpView does. And that's really what we're trying to do. If we can do that with 100 Anandas, I don't have to sell UpView to you, right? And that's really our focus. And just to kind of build off that, I think ChatGPT, at least for content creators, is completely useless. That's because what it does is it uses almost AGI to come up with some great textual ideas, but you don't watch videos because you want to watch average scripts. You watch videos because you want to see that guy who traveled America on 25 cents. Now try and get that kind of a script from ChatGPT. It's not going to happen. So that's where Upview is trying to make that difference.
I see your fault that in that.
I didn't think I was defensive. That didn't sound defensive to me. No, I think, Tammy, to be honest, I'm struggling to remember your question because there's so many interesting things that Srina and Bhavik have brought up. But I think that what you were asking is I need to sit through bullshit. Okay.
So you're fun baby, like,
Yeah.
what you're doing without like using AI as a crutch or like without being put into like, oh, you're just another AI company.
Yeah. So how do you, if you are if you were to present as an authentic organization, how would you leverage, or how would you communicate the fact that you're using AI in an effective way? Okay. Yeah. I think that no question that is, pretty much on every deck that comes across any investor's desk at this point. But I think that's something that is worth considering. Certainly is, the hype of language models. The hype of language models and the incredible potential and the incredible volume of work that's been done outside of LLM models and the scope of machine learning and AI. I think for good reason, language models have been kind of like in the media and right in front of us for, the past like 6 months, a year or so. And that's because it's incredibly tangible. It's incredibly easy for those who aren't technical to connect with. And, like I mentioned before, in a healthcare context, it's very useful to me as a CTO because it allows me to communicate in a more effective way with folks who may not otherwise be technical. So I think that's, in a lot of ways, for many reasons, LLMs are a massive move forward. But I think that one of the key things here is that something I think about a lot is that there are many neural network models that are not massive LLMs that are incredibly useful. And particularly in my world, in healthcare, where, recommendations around orders, prescriptions, diagnoses may not require the use of a language model, but can be incredibly useful in terms of providing assistance to an operation that would otherwise be one-to-one, which with support of machine learning can become one-to-many, right? And that's where that kind of democratization comes in. That's where the expense reduction comes in. As I think a lot about the impact of AI on healthcare, what I think about really is about creating more one-to-many situations where, if right now I have a physician seeing a patient one-on-one, how can I create a scenario where my physician with an incredible background in endocrinology can, instead of seeing one patient at a time, can see 25 patients at a time, or 50 patients at a time, or 200 patients at a time. And that's where we see, a real reduction in the cost of healthcare across the country. That's where we see a real reduction in terms of healthcare spending from a taxpayer standpoint. That in large part, that's not reliant on language models. That's reliant on other sorts of machine learning that have been in existence for a while and are still incredibly important.
So now we have some time for audience question. Anyone would like to ask a question?
I think this mic works, yeah. Sure, you do that too.
We were talking about LLM to do before, right? So Or is that better? It's really then. How do you actually deal with the validity of the actual predictions that you're actually coming up with, right? Because if is it specifically trained in one way off of one specific expert that has a specific type of, I don't know, we'll say experience, right? But we're talking about stick that can actually yield a result, like reputable result.
There we go. That's a great question and a very important question. And really any industry where you deal with critical software like an electronic medical record or something like that. I'll say very practically, the pragmatic approach is to consider LLMs to be a user interface. It's a way to generate language that you can use to communicate with patients, physicians, et cetera, without the humans. I think that the more reliable approach at this point in the evolution of large language models, my perspective, not everybody's, but my perspective, is to focus more so on models that are maybe a little bit smaller, but more focused on specific use cases. So that's one piece, is having a stack that incorporates LLMs for communications, but leverages other models for making recommendations. The other piece is to think about the human in the loop model. It's incredibly important in a healthcare context where particularly at this point in our world, not everything can be automated. There are many decisions which are low risk, which we can decide to automate, but I'd say 50 to 75% decisions are not automatable in this moment right now. We're working on that. But in the case of healthcare, with incorporating human in the loop, that's human in our case as a physician, a trained, say, endocrinologist to continue that use case. And our perspective is that we generate a recommendation for that endocrinologist, and that endocrinologist has an opportunity to accept or reject. Another interesting scenario in healthcare is I guess as we begin to incorporate more machine learning techniques into healthcare, operations change too. And so one thing that we at Aikido, think a lot about is it pays to be both the technologist and the physician, right? Our physicians are employed by us. Our providers take care of patients. We're also a technology company. And so we can decide we can change operations. We have that kind of decision-making capability. And so figuring out ways to create more learning loops, for example, an endocrinologist overseeing 4 nurse practitioners that each oversee a panel of patients gives us several layers of opportunities to introduce moments for our algorithms to learn versus just that one endocrinologist human in the loop, if that makes sense. And so there's lots of opportunities to sort of shift operations to introduce more humans in the loop, which create more almost exponential opportunities for learning that can accelerate those models. Does that answer your question? Oh, absolutely. No, I think that's a great point. I'll just repeat your point, is that credibility is a very important aspect in healthcare and really any other, kind of enterprise industry which is reliant on these critical systems. Credibility is huge, and the way that, especially in the early days of introducing machine learning to these operations, the way we generate that credibility is by providing recommendations as opposed to fully making those decisions ourselves. So, yeah.
We have time for one more question. Someone right in front. Sorry.
It is specifically addressing mobile climate free. GP4 costs about 1.3 megawatt power and about 5.2 tons, and then GP4 hasn't been doubled. You create so much carbon every time you take a button to modeling thing. And there the US Air Force already have bunch of computers doing wind predictions. Real-time HPC costs a lot more power than people think it is. I don't think this thing has anything to do with climate.
Yeah, that's a great point. So there's a lot of conversation, especially. Oh, are you still there? Oh, okay. There's a lot of conversation on as we start to increase the use of technology, especially as there's high server loads, that they increase energy use, right? My main argument to that, for one, I don't think ChatGPT is the answer to everything. I think it's our entry point to AI. I think it's the way that people understand the application. Like you said, it's a really easy way for people to get the tangible use case of AI. I don't think we're all going to be using ChatGPT forever. So I think that's the first point. The second thing is that I think most people who work in the climate space is that we should just have everything run on renewable energy. Why are any of our servers not running on renewable energy? So for us to be able to move towards a world where all of our processes are effective renewable is just where we need to move. I mean, every time you search something on Google has a climate footprint, right? So the use of the internet, the use of any technology service has a climate footprint. Of course, AI, when you're processing way more, has a larger footprint. But the internet's not going anywhere. The future of technology is not going anywhere. So what we need to do is change the underlying infrastructure to make sure that we continue moving forward, continue building, continue making things more accessible, democratizing access to learning, to all the different tools that we can create, but ensure that it's all built on renewables. So I think that's my take on it, is that we're not stopping technology moving forward. As someone who personally is a climate activist, do I love the fact that everything has a huge climate footprint? No. But are we going to stop the future of innovation? No. No one's going to be on board with that. So what we need to do is make sure all of the underlying infrastructure is renewable.
Amazing. And with that, thank you, Shrina, Jared, and Bobby for taking the time to share about your story. And my favorite takeaway to investors, don't buy the bullshit. Thank you.
Can we get panel number 2 to please come up? We have Matt, Karthik, and Jen. All right, we're going to jump into the second panel for the sake of time. And just off the bat, I would love if the three of you could please just give a quick introduction of who you are, what your company does, and how AI fits into what you do. Karthik, you want to start?
Hi, everyone. I'm Karthik Shekhar. I'm head of data science at Climax Foods, and we innovate plant-based cheese to be better than conventional dairy cheese. And we use machine learning to help us find formulations faster than would be possible with conventional food science. And it's been an exciting year for us. We actually just launched our blue cheese at a few select restaurants throughout the country. If you go to Baya, you can have it on a salad. It's gotten rave reviews. We actually even had French journalists try it and give high regards. And we're also fundraising. So if you're interested in what I'm talking about, please talk to me later if you want to pay for it.
Yo, people in the back, shut up. Thanks.
Yeah, hey everybody. My name is Matt Rappaport, and I am the general partner at Future Frontier Capital. We're a pre-seed frontier technology venture capital firm. This is the first time I've been involved with a venture capital firm. For the last 20 years, I ran my own company, and we specialized in intellectual property strategy. And so I'm really excited to be here and talk about AI. We use AI in lots of different ways on the data that we analyze and screen to understand what's happening in the startup world. And we also evaluate a lot of companies that are working in different aspects and applying AI to their business models.
Hey, I'm Jen Zhu. I am the CEO and founder of Odyssey. We created an AI co-pilot for community health work. So connecting patients to social services like food, housing, transportation, domestic violence resources, financial assistance. I like to think of myself as an AI OG. I did AI before ChatGPT blew up in the hype train. But my entire career has been in healthcare. So I was a community health worker at Boston Medical Center in 2010. I managed community health workers in Honduras, India, Uganda with the UN and the Nicholas Christakis lab. And then I was one of the rare people in Silicon Valley that actually did government and worked at the White House, CMS Innovation Center, Congress Ways and Means Committee. Fucking hated it. So then went back to the startup world. And then I was at Carbon Health, where I designed services and programs, the like primary care strategy and growth. And that was like chief of staff of a serious mental illness services startup. And I'm currently fundraising, so I'm very sleep deprived and like unfiltered. So please excuse anything that I say today.
Awesome, thank you. My first question is actually for Karthik. Food and AI, like how does that work? Can you walk us through the story of how AI actually fits into vegan cheese?
Absolutely. So there are two major aspects. The first aspect is finding the optimal formulation, what we call precision formulation. And I want to distinguish that from precision fermentation. So if you think about the task of coming up with recipes for plant-based cheeses, the task is quite overwhelming. So there's over 300,000 ample varieties of plants. There's all the combinations to try them, all the microbes to culture with them. And there's just no way to test everything physically in a kitchen. And so we develop models to optimize for taste, texture, flavor, and affordability and nutrition. And so you can imagine that data science is helping us reduce the search space to find novel formulations. So that's the first aspect. The second aspect is being able to do predictions on novel plant proteins. So I mentioned that there's over 300,000 edible varieties of plants, but we can't test 300,000 plants. So we need to be able to do some sort of inference or prediction on those plants. And so we have efforts geared around that.
Awesome, cool. And actually, drilling to Jen, since you guys are both startups, how does AI fit into the community health worker space? Like, can you walk us through the journey of how the Venn diagram of AI and what you're working on?
Yeah, I feel like AI is not meant to be, I mean, people like idolize AI sometimes, especially in Silicon Valley, and you're like, oh, people, come on. Whatever. Okay, but like, yeah, like AI is not meant to be like smarter than the smartest human being. It's supposed to like 10x efficiency and make things faster. And in healthcare, it's really tricky, right? Like if you're doing clinical decision support with AI, you're like, dude, you should take this medication, and then they die. Like you end up on the New York Times for bad reasons. Like you want to use AI at this point of time for automating administrative work. And I feel like, they're actually, originally, I was looking at AI for healthcare providers and doctors and traditional, clinical care providers. But like community health workers, they're so neglected and they deal with the most administrative work. Like they are spending hours on each task trying to navigate the government bureaucracy and like fight the system and understand insurance benefit design and, like Medicaid policies, Medicare policies. Like I had a friend, Zach, who was like, I just want to work for you 30 hours a week, like on top of my full-time job, just like put me at work, let me do anything. And I'm like, okay, help this patient find free transportation to her appointment. It's like a real SF patient that we found through a federally qualified health center. It took this man, 3 hours to do it. He like graduated top of his class from a UC school, and he was like, oh my God, you put me through hell. Like I was like going, I was calling Medicaid, and then I was calling all the non-emergency medical transportation providers, and I was calling the healthcare providers, and you just sent me on the wild goose chase. And I'm like, can you imagine someone with a high school diploma or like someone who's less savvy, tech savvy, less resourceful, less well-connected? Like we are saving 3 hours on average per task, just fighting the system. And I say that as someone who worked in government, So I think like a lot of people forget the lower skilled workers in terms of like how technology can uplift them and make their work, like really help them focus on the work that like brings them joy and makes them come alive. Like
they become community health workers to help people and to make that human connection and relationship. And then meanwhile, there's like a bajillion AI scribe companies being like, we're going to dictate, we're going to like, blah, 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 translate like doctor words into like notes. There's so many companies and then like they're lacking defensibility. Everybody can build on OpenAI. They're lacking distribution. Epic and Cerner are going to fucking kill them. They're lacking demand. Like doctors like, we don't want to use you. We don't trust you. So like I pivoted from like traditional clinical care providers to the people who are like really dealing with the brunt of like administrative work and bureaucratic work. So I feel like AI can like help so many people in our society, not just like the most educated or the most highly skilled people.
It's awesome, Jen. That kind of this word of access really comes up, right? And democratization to make sure that people that need what they're looking for actually get it, which actually leapfrogs perfectly to the question I had for Matt. You go by Matt or Matthew? Matt's fine. Matt has a really cool company before where he basically looks through IP, like he just said, in universities. When you're looking at all of this IP that comes there, two things. One, can you kind of explain how that process works and what you're looking for? And then secondarily, within the lens of AI, kind of to what Jen said, how do you make sure people are just not building the next ChatGPT plugin that like makes the next word that you predict better, right? Like what are you seeing from the investment side given what you're seeing?
Yeah, sure. So our process is quite unique. So we have a database of 120 million patent documents and then many hundreds of millions of scientific literature documents. And we mine that information to identify trends in technology landscapes. And then we use that information to help determine what areas are growing, how quickly they're growing, what technologies are emerging, how quickly those technologies are emerging, and then try and make investment bets or investments on which of those things we think are going to sort of outperform the others. And so we do that in a variety of ways. An example I like to talk about is in the area of drones. We started looking at drone technology back in 2010. There were a few very early companies that had filed some early patents that were citing scientific literature from universities. And some of those companies have become extremely successful, and they're sort of on the cusp of releasing those technologies through regulatory approval in the US and Switzerland and other places. Matternet is one, and Zipline are companies that you might have heard of. So they started over like 13, 14 years ago developing this technology. And so part of our challenge is to sort of identify what areas are emerging and then try to figure out when we want to deploy capital based on that timeline. So if I tell a limited partner that we're going to deploy capital today, but they're not going to see return for 13 years, they're not very interested. So we're trying to find that sweet spot. And so we're using artificial intelligence in a lot of different ways to both screen companies that come to us, and then also once we learn about those companies to figure out what the landscape or the technology landscape is that they're working in, and we use AI to summarize sort of what else is happening in those areas. So it's a really helpful tool for us. In terms of companies that are building on a API from OpenAI or from ChatGPT, those are companies that probably wouldn't come across our radar. They would certainly contact us, but we would likely screen many of those companies out. So ultimately we see sort of the winners as those organizations that are developing the models, and those organizations need a ton of money and they need a ton of compute. And there's very few of those that we think will actually take control. And then there's all kinds of companies like what Kartik's talking about and Jen are talking about, where they're deploying these AIs to make their processes more efficient and to bring sort of more value to their clients and their customers, whether those people are eating vegan cheese or working in the health community.
Can you quickly talk about the landscape of models that you're seeing? I think you touched on an interesting point of everything is not an LLM, right? Everything's not a large language model. What are like 2 to 3 cool models outside of what we all know as ChatGPT are we seeing out there?
Yeah, so I think a lot of the models that Tesla is working on and a lot of the automotive companies are working on are really interesting. They're pushing the limits both on compute, processing power, and data. The companies with the data are going to win in this space. There's no question about it. So, but that can be true for smaller companies as well. I don't see that it's a winner-take-all situation. You could have a fragmented situation. There's a company that I talked to the founder of tonight who has a company. They have amazing data that they're pulling from their hardware, and that data can be processed and analyzed using some of these models, not just LLMs, but there are certainly other vectors that could be used as well. And I think those companies have the potential to be very successful.
Cool. This actually reminds me of something Karthik said earlier. You guys use AI to do formulation, and you also can find new and interesting ingredients for how you can scrape across thousands and hundreds of thousands of ingredients. This seems like a beachhead to a much larger thing. Like, what's the vision of Climax? What are you guys trying to build?
Yeah, so we're building a database because, just as Matt said, the key is data. You know, really at the end of the day, the ball can be perfunctory. And we want to be able to do any sort of functionality. And one thing I like to tell people is when we go back in history and see how we replaced horses for transportation, we didn't do it with robotic horses, right? We did it with cars, motorcycles, and so forth. And so I think that analogy also holds for food. I don't think there's a reason that we have to, consign ourselves to hamburgers or steaks. I think what's exciting is, something that's as healthy and vitamin rich as a bowl of kale, but, tastes as good as a bowl of ice cream, right? And so by being able to unlock novel ingredients and functionalities, who knows what we'll come up with.
Pretty cool. Jen, this was actually brought up on the panel before, which I want to bring back, around the risks of AI in healthcare. Jared had a great response to that, but I want to get your take on how do you make sure that the community health workers or the patients or the end users that you have, especially with something like healthcare, which we just saw in the Bay with a large healthcare debacle. How do you fix that? Like, what's the risk there, and what are you doing to mitigate those challenges?
I mean, I'll talk about what we're doing in particular because we're not doing clinical decision support at this point of time. Like, we're working, community health workers are trained lay people. They're paraprofessionals. You and I could be community health workers. I, as an early stage startup founder, am basically one of the community health workers for my company, helping patients and whatnot. But we stay away from the clinical realm because that gets very dangerous, especially with AI being able to hallucinate. Imagine if they hallucinate the wrong dosage. They're really, it's AI is really bad at numbers, it's not a math girl that or math boy, you want to, with all the phone numbers that we have, Medi-Cal numbers, non-emergency medical transportation numbers, we put it in a database because we don't want it to freaking hallucinate. And the patient's you gave me the number to I don't know, something weird. And then we're oh no, and they're we don't trust you ever again. It could get a lot worse with medical care where it's you told me to take 4 times the dosage of my my cancer regimen drug, and then you ruin people's lives. So we stay, for now, our use case is connecting patients to social services. How we mitigate that, it's really easy to build on top of open AI these days, and there are a bunch of plugins. There's a plugin store, but it only goes up to a certain date, as you may well know. In the past year, there have been billions of dollars in funding. There's a huge why now opportunity for what I'm building. And ChatGPT doesn't recognize that. It's I'm stuck in 2021, it has no idea. So we have to upload PDFs of insurance benefit files, of policies,
I use my previous work in the government to basically be the human in the loop that's fine-tuning these models. We use our community health workers to integrate knowledge across organizations. We know and we're pretty aware of OpenAI and like AI in general, like their liabilities and vulnerabilities. So we know that it has a tendency to hallucinate phone numbers, which like you may think, oh, it's not a big deal if like someone calls the wrong phone number for food or housing, but they're overwhelmed and they are like barely surviving day after day and they're experiencing homelessness. If you give them a wrong number, they're not going to trust you again. They're not going to come back to you. You've lost that patient forever. So we also just like have a database of numbers that our model cannot hallucinate, and it'll just like reference check. Like AI is a tool. Like I think honestly, hot, spicy take, like AI is not the world's salvation. Like I grew up in the South in Texas and North Carolina, and like people are like, ChatGPT is crazy. Like they don't even know what ChatGPT is. And if the people who do, they're like, if you look at the Facebook comments on like Jasper and like other AI companies, people are like, AI is taking over the world. AI is ruining everything. Why is AI doing this? Like we are in a bubble in Silicon Valley. We have to realize like what the masses will actually adopt and with what kind of level of trust and what rate. So all that to say, like we have to get out of the bubble. We have to be very aware of AI's weaknesses and the state of AI right now. Like we're not at AGI right now. I know some people think we are, but like I don't think we are. It's not her. It's not going to take over the world right now. So we just have to be like really real and honest with like the strengths and the weaknesses of AI.
Check. All right. One last fire round question for all three of you. In less than 2 sentences, we'll start with Jen, Matt, and Karthik. I'll let you guys think about this for like a second. You guys are all building companies in AI. If you fast forward 25 years, first of all, what does the world look like then if you're fast forwarding? Using the technologies that you guys are building with, hopefully Jen and Karthik have billion-dollar companies that are listed on the stock market. Cool. Secondarily, what risks did we have to mitigate in that 25-year process to make sure something really didn't go wrong? Start with you, Matt. 2 sentences. Yeah. 1 sentence for what the future looks like at that point in time, and 1 sentence for the risks that we had to mitigate.
Well, I will put my optimist hat on and say in 25 years, the future looks amazing. There's abundance. People aren't suffering. There's not a lot of war, no weapons, right? Children are flourishing, and we have a better place than we have now.
That we have to mitigate.
Yeah, we have to figure out a way to get everybody on the same page. So that's the biggest risk.
You can pick the next victim, Karthik.
I'm also an optimist, and I think the world in 25 years, if we are successful, means that we've completely or 90% moved away from animal agriculture into foods that taste better, are more nutritious, more affordable than anything we can even do with animals. And I think in terms of risks that we would have mitigated, I agree with Matt that it's public trust. So somehow endearing ourselves to the public is really important in this pursuit.
I thought I was an optimist, but like, damn, I'm like the cynic here. Like, people are messed up, you know? Like, people have like their fallibilities and they're like, they have their evil, dark tendencies. I even forget the question because I got like distracted by that. I was like, oh, what's the future?
The question is, in 25 years, what did the future look like, and what risks did we have to mitigate to get there?
I think like humans are selfish and we want to just have a good time. So like we're going to use technology to make our lives easier and more efficient. And like, I don't think it necessarily would put people out of jobs, which is like a fear, especially in the South where I grew up, right? It's more like it'll liberate people to do other weird stuff with our time. So whatever, people just have like more free time. They'll like the administrative stuff that we're doing is like automated by AI being 10 times more efficient. The other question was, what risks can we mitigate? I should not say this, but like certain AI powerhouses, they love to consolidate power, and they're like, you should regulate us, meaning you should build a moat for us, and you should make us more defensible by keeping new entrants from coming in the market. That's probably kill some funding for me, but like, whatever, I don't care. It's power. There's a book called Corruptible, which I was recently recommended, and I think like power can corrupt some individuals, a lot of individuals, and like the people with power are the ones who are going to decide like what are the guardrails of society. So like if the people with power are creating the AI models, like the AI, AI is like trained in certain ways because they have the biases of their creators. Like there's this amazing Google ethics, like AI, you probably know her name, but she left Google because she was concerned about like the ethics of the AI that they're creating. But, we're only as, the technology is only as good as we are and only as good as our own biases. So like, if we are not egalitarian or we're not like, good intentioned, like it's going to perpetrate power. Like it's going to entrench the power of the people who have the power because they're like, dude, I love power. I love money. Like I'm just going to like live on my yachts forever. Like that's amazing. Private jets all day. Like, yeah. So I think like we need to be really careful about who has access to this like really incredible technology and what they do with it.
Cool. Thanks. All right. We have time for about 2 questions. What's your question?
Experience this week, I've developed a stealth AI startup on my LinkedIn, and that endeavor VCs reach out to me. We just the AI next go let's go out right now.
So I'm gonna repeat that. You put that you are part of a stealth AI startup on your LinkedIn. You got 10 VCs just reaching out to you. Who's that question to?
What?
I put AI healthcare startup. I had more than 100 different VCs go inbound. And honestly, my advice to you is like, don't get distracted by them. Like VCs are always, sorry, VCs in the room, like you guys always want deal flow, right? That's your job. Like if you're not ready to talk to the VCs, they're a distraction. Your focus should always be customers, product, building. And like, if you're not ready to talk to the VCs, you could get a boo-boo in their CRM. They have like a fucking Rolodex on us. Like they have your email addresses. They have a summary on you. They will put in comments like, this guy doesn't know what he's doing. He says he's like stealth AI, but he hasn't thought about anything. And you're like, I just started. They don't care. Like, so you just got to be careful. And I don't know, like, yeah, it's great to put that you're stealth AI. Everybody's going to flock to you. It's like still hot. It's a hype train right now. But like, are you ready to handle them? And do you want to waste your time? Talk.
Is this your equivalent of Tinder or Bumble? Like, are you trying to? Okay. Is the space super hot right now, Matt? Is it too hot for its own good?
It's too hot right now.
So I had a meeting with my COO today, and we were talking about the fundraising process. And so our company can cast itself toward climate tech, food tech, or AI. And yeah, I guess which direction we decided on.
I have one more question, sir.
There's great intelligence and wisdom.
Can someone distinguish the difference between intelligence and wisdom? Was the question.
I'd like to invite my friend John to come up and distinguish that because you have more wisdom than anybody in this room. So,
Well, I think the answer is we don't know, and we don't know how to do that. That's my answer. There's the
I don't know the answer necessarily, but I read a quote recently that I thought was really beautiful, and it's like, intelligence is looking at the world around you, wisdom is looking within you. And, I think there's a reason why we call it artificial intelligence. Like, it's trained on so much data that's publicly available, or even like, sketchily uploaded from private, like, secure intelligence sources. But wisdom is like looking within and being like truly strategic and intentional. But that's just a quote I read from a book. So.
All right, one more question. Yes.
People wake up for 3 different generations. It's a very beautiful girl. They reach the green. The green, after reaching the green, the girl says that whosoever helps me put the ball in, he is gonna bet with me. All right? So you have the father, the son, and the grandmother. So the son says, oh, parent, he is the ultimate, I'll help her. So, all right, take your breath. So he goes, lie down on the green, tells her how to putt, and as expected with a 10-foot putt, he misses it. Then the father says, look, this is where you go and drop, I'll show you how to do it. He lies down, goes back and forth, shows her the line, and she again misses it. Then comes the grandfather. He walks up to her, puts her around her shoulders, and say, baby, the putt is given. Let's go. That's wisdom. These are the intelligent.
3 generations of men going after the same girls. That's my question.
All right, we have one quick question. Yes, ma'am.
What work is being done to combat AI algorithmic bias?
What work is being done to combat AI algorithmic biases is the question. Who wants to take that one? Karthik.
So for our process, we have a model that's working together with people who are actually making prototypes, and we're also getting feedback from consumers. And for anything that's novel, we are going through all the regulatory agencies. So there's always a human in the loop. Our models are so specific that they can't really do anything beyond just helping us with prototyping. So in some ways, just the human barriers are helping us, making sure we're not doing anything too unethical.
And I will just add, there are lots of organizations that are working really hard on this. I'll give a shout out to one called Credo AI, where a friend of mine is working, and they're doing amazing work and trying to solve this problem because it is a big problem. Humans are biased, and so why aren't the computers that they create biased as well? So
Amazing.
Piggybacking on that, because I always have an opinion. Humans are biased, so the things that they create are biased. If we have all, I'm not this is maybe revealing my proclivities, but if we have all Elon Musk type white men making all the AI, they're gonna have certain Elon Musk white men biases. If we have more diversity in terms of creating the AI algorithms, they kind of offset each other. And there's also this thing called the implicit association test that I think Harvard came up with. So just know your biases, check your biases, diversify them, offset them. But I feel the biggest powerful thing that you could do to address biases is to introduce diversity and the people who have power who are creating these tools.
Awesome. Let's get a round of applause for the panelists. Thank you all. All right, our event is coming quickly to a close. This Unleashed is probably one of many Unleashed events that we're going to do, so please email us with feedback. One last person I want to give the mic to is Rohit from Future Communities Capital, who is our sponsor, so please give him a round of applause.
Thank you. Hey, everyone. Managing Director of Future Communities Capital. I'm technically throwing this event with my friends. And look, I'm so proud of San Francisco and the tech community here for showing up. It's so great to see so many of my old friends, so many of my new friends, people I don't know. And this is amazing. This is why I love tech. We all come here, we support each other, we build stuff together. This is a completely DIY event. My friends, Ravi and Jay, 2 weeks ago said, let's do something. Jay said, I have a space. I called up my friends at Truffle Shuffle. You know, they help with the catering. We crushed it tonight, all of us. This is what we want to see in San Francisco. This is how we want to build. This is how we're going to build AI the right way. I want to thank all of you for coming. We're going to be hanging out here for a bit. Feel free to kick it with us. Come talk to us. Come start more events with us. We're all part of this together. Thank you so much.